Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. This show is brought to you by Simplifying, which has been helping build trust in travel for over a decade. Through in-depth conversation with aviation leaders, Sustainability in the Air breaks through the current clutter and provides a clear roadmap for the future. It's about time we embarked on creating a net zero future for the industry, together. This season of the podcast is brought to you by Carbon Click, leaders in managing carbon offsetting programs for top global airlines. Without further ado, here is your host, Shashank Nigam, CEO of Simplifying.
Welcome to another episode of Sustainability in the Air podcast with me, Shashank Nigam, your host. And today I have Amy Burr, the president of JetBlue Technology Ventures, joining us. And a lot of you might have heard of JetBlue. You might have heard of venture capitalist firms. But this is a very unique situation where an airline is running a technology ventures fund. And Amy has the unique opportunity to lead this. Amy, welcome to the podcast. And I'm very curious, how do you find yourself in this unique role?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really fantastic role, and it is a unique kind of perspective within the industry. I've been in the airline industry for 22 years, a long time. And I have traditionally been part of an operating airline. So, mainly with roles on, strategy and commercial and IT, customer facing IT functions. I started my career in the airline industry with Continental Airlines many, many years ago. Spent 4 years there, but then I was a founder at Virgin America. And I was with Virgin America from the very beginning, employee number 20, before we were actually an airline, before we actually had a separate company that was the airline, all the way until the very end with the merger with Alaska. And during that time, I had a number of different roles, a lot of them around how do we embrace kind of the future of technology and bring a better product experience, whatever it might be, to both our customers and our team, right? So, after I left with the Virgin America Alaska merger, I started, I saw this role with JetBlue Tech Ventures. At the time, it was the managing director of operations, which is our our innovation side of the business. I thought this is a perfect spot for me. I have deep, knowledge of the industry and how we operate and the problems we have and the pain points we try to solve and kind of what our strategy looks like for the future. But, this role, JTV, we're mandated to look beyond what we do every single day in the industry. And we're looking at how technology will change kind of the future and what opportunities are there for us to, do our business better and, just be a better airline and provide a better product and a better experience for our customers through technology. And so this is definitely something that, I've enjoyed over the course of my career. So I started with JTV back in 2018, spent several years kind of running the innovation side of our business, which is a nice complement to the investment side of our business. And then, about a year ago, I took over the organization and have been president now for a while. And it's a fantastic role. I'm super excited every single day to go to work. It's just really great to be able to be part of a really dynamic industry, but looking at it from a different perspective. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
It sounds like an amazing ride. I remember first, I think we spoke, or I definitely learned about you when you did the Salesforce Chatter project back in Virgin America, and with the on-demand in-flight chatting and ordering, and that was the first time I remember first hearing about you back in the Virgin America days. And then, of course, over the last couple of years during COVID, we worked together on Simplifying Launchpad, of which you were an instrumental part in giving lots of startup feedback. But through COVID, things have changed for the airline industry. How has your strategy at JTV changed because of COVID or throughout the pandemic?
It definitely was it has been, I don't know that we can say it's over yet, but it's been a very, very interesting time in this industry. Challenging, lots of opportunity. Nothing's ever entirely bad. Nothing's ever entirely good. There's lots of good and bad in everything that we're doing. COVID, as soon as COVID became a very real, issue for our countries and lockdowns happened and travel really fell off. What it did for us at JetBlue Tech Ventures is it changed kind of the perspective of the work we were doing on a day-to-day basis. We spent less time thinking about things that were compelling to invest in and spent more time, like really doubled down on in the innovation side of our business. And we were, our job is to help JetBlue think beyond what they're, doing in the operation right now and think about how they can use technology in a different way. And so at that time, as soon as things locked down, as soon as things started to change, we spent a lot of time on, health and safety, cleaning tech, how can we use technology to really kind of dive into a program that JetBlue launched right away, safety from the ground up. How do we clean our aircraft better? How do we track and help people from a health perspective, like things like thermal scanning, like do we thermally scan like everybody at the airport so we know who has a fever, just crazy stuff like that. How do we use health passports to enable information flow as people are starting to return to travel? We spent just so much time looking at technology that can help JetBlue kind of get everybody comfortable with flying again. A lot of self-service technology, like how can we double down on self-service technology where customers don't feel like they have to talk to somebody every single second of their travel, right? Because during COVID, that was a really big deal. You didn't want to have that interaction with people. You wanted to just be able to like get through the process as quickly as possible without, any interaction. But then the other piece of that, we spent a lot of time on that. We spent a lot of time with JetBlue just thinking like, hey, try this. Hey, here's this crazy kiosk cleaner. Hey, there's UV tech that can clean the whole aircraft. Like all of these kinds of things. But we also really recognized during that time frame that a couple key aspects of our business were changing. Number one, one area that we really kind of dug into was the change of hospitality. So people, as they came back to travel, they didn't want to think about like, oh, I'm going to stay at a hotel. That was scary to them. So now they're starting to think about, the importance of, short-term rentals and that type of accommodation grew substantially. So we started to really dig into that. The importance of sustainability really. It's an interesting dynamic that COVID made everybody think more about their sustainability programs, but it did. As people stopped flying and emissions were decreased because people weren't driving. It became so front and center that hey, we really do have to solve this problem. Like, look, this is an example of when all of this is cut down and it's great. But we can't. This won't happen on its own. So sustainability tech really became important. So that was another piece of the work that we started to really dig into, like what are the important levers we can pull as an industry over the course of time. And there was we had a small pause in like active investments, but it was small, it was short, and we came back, during COVID and started investing in really important technologies. And had a great year last year, especially. 2020 was probably a little bit more challenging for everybody as we tried to find our way through this new reality. But we, really, focused on our strength as a firm to help JetBlue through, and that's probably what happened the most.
This is fantastic background, right? When you say you had a great year last year, what are the metrics at JetBlue Technology Ventures? Is it to make as much technology go over to JetBlue to be used today? Is it for as much technology for JetBlue for tomorrow, or is it for the entire industry? How much is this? How much of your success is linked to JetBlue using what you're bringing in? And if JetBlue doesn't use it, doesn't mean it didn't work, or should other airlines be using it? What is success?
We look at success in a number of different ways, which is, and this is a tricky thing in our particular industry in a corporate venture capital firm. So we measure success, for our business, for the venture firm business, we measure success in two different ways: strategic value and financial value. Of course, we're doing investments, we're making investments in startups. Of course, we track very closely financially if they're successful or not. We help them grow as startups. We want them to be successful. Ultimately, we want them to exit our portfolio and for us to have a return. Of course, and we definitely are very focused on making sure that part of our business is successful. But on the the JetBlue side of the business, or the strategic side of the business, we do consider ourselves a very strategic investor. Our goal is to find interesting startups, and compelling technology for JetBlue travel products, for some partners we have. We invest in three different time horizons. So some of what we invest in is immediately applicable and should be used by somebody within our kind of portfolio of partners. JetBlue obviously being the most important. Some of the tech we invest in is a little bit more future looking. So we look at things that, hey, in 2 to 5 years, this could be really, really interesting for a future strategy for JetBlue or for JetBlue travel products or for whoever. Or even more so, like in 7 to 10 years, this is going to transform our industry. So the way we look at it is, each startup that we bring into our portfolio or each startup that we bring to JetBlue, should be compelling for either now or for the future. It could change the travel industry itself. It could change JetBlue and how we do business. Some of our startups aren't working with JetBlue, but they are, providing benefit for the industry. And I think that is a real big key piece of what we do. We're here to make travel better, and some of that, means it's a little bit further out, and we're trying to make sure we stay ahead of disruption in the industry. We want to make sure that JetBlue knows the things that are coming. We invested in Joby Aviation, for example. It was an eVTOL. It's an eVTOL company, an electric vehicle takeoff and landing aircraft that will be an air taxi. And we invested in them in 2017, long before they were ready to actually fly an aircraft. And now they're making really great progress, and are working their way through certification, project plans, and all of those kinds of things. And the way we looked at it is, someday our customers are going to take an air taxi. And what we want to do is make sure that JetBlue understands that market and how our customers might use that market. And so that is an important piece of the business we do. We don't want JetBlue to be surprised by something new in the marketplace that we haven't seen. That's not, that's a little bit of why we're here. So anyway, long rambling story on multiple reasons, multiple ways that we measure success, for sure.
So you're definitely like a periscope for JetBlue that's looking out, into the future.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And I love your time horizons that you've shared, short term, medium term, and then long term.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go towards sustainability. This is a podcast on sustainable aviation.
Yes.
And I really wanted to have you on because JetBlue has taken a pole position when it comes to investing in sustainable technologies, Joby being a good example. My understanding is that most sustainability technologies are long term. Some are medium term.
Yeah.
How is it a patient game when it comes to sustainability investment like Joby or others?
Yeah, actually, an interesting. This is an interesting piece of our business. JetBlue, the airways side of the business, they are spending every single day. They have an entire team looking at how can they meet their net carbon zero goals, which are aggressive and real. And the entire industry has this goal, by 2050 to be net carbon zero. And I think our goal is 2040, and, how can they actually start pulling levers today to get to move towards those goals? And so they think about, obviously, early sustainability tech is like carbon offsetting, which will sunset someday, right? That's not the long term, but that's, a lever you can pull now. And they think about sustainable aviation fuel and how can they increase the amount of sustainable aviation fuel that they have, that we fly with. What we think about, our side of the business is thinking longer term than that for them. So we're looking at longer term tech. And so this is a patient game. This is a long game. We are looking and investing in tech that is a little bit like the next generation. It's, alternative propulsion systems. We have an investment in universal hydrogen. How will hydrogen be able to be plugged into aircraft someday to actually be an actual fuel source? We think about electric propulsion systems, electric hybrid aviation, aircraft, those types of things. We think about direct air capture and how, instead of storing carbon that you pull from the air, how do you make fuel out of that? So that's the next generation of sustainable aviation fuel. We think about, the next generation of actual sustainable aviation fuel. Like, what are the newer, what are changing kind of, bio stock that you can use to make sustainable aviation fuel, and how's that going to transform over time? So we make investments in some of these technologies to help them grow. and we have that gives us a seat at the table and helps us like direct kind of how they think about it for the industry. And that's important for us. But we are investing in the next generation beyond what we can use right now to pull these levers to help us meet these goals long term. So it is a long play. Yeah.
Right. This is definitely patient capital, right? Now,
Hmm.
my question is, how do you decide? Because this is a blossoming space right now, which is good news for
Yeah.
aviation. Because there's Joby and Lilium and Boom and 50 others
Yeah.
that are trying to, hit at the same issue from different angles. How do you decide to go with one and not the other? Because you can't be investing in all of them. JetBlue can't be ordering, 500 Lilium planes and 1,000 Joby eVTOLs and plugging them into universal hydrogen. How do you decide one versus the other? There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually like just a topic in general, that as a CVC, is on our mind all the time. You see thousands of startups in all kinds of different spaces, obviously sustainability being one of our biggest themes. Um, and you have to choose, who you think will be the winner. So it can be tricky. It can be tough. We look at a lot of different things. We look at how they're solving a problem, whether it's a unique and kind of like, what we think will be a successful way of solving a specific problem. We look at the team. The team is very important. How do we feel about the founders? How do we feel about the growth of their team over the course of time? Like, are they bringing in the right, people to help run the business? We think about traction. Like, are they being very realistic about their plans to like kind of penetrate the market? Are they making good traction? Are they making good choices? What are they going to use the money for? That's an important piece for us. Like, what are you going to use this money for? Tell me how you're going to take this investment, round that you're raising right now and use it to catapult yourself into the next phase of growth. And so, there's a little bit of, you have to figure out kind of what's the right startup for you. An example might be the direct air capture to fuel area. There might be 100 of these companies. So which is the best one? And so, we do a lot of due diligence on our companies. Our team is very, very smart about the particular areas we look into. And, we try to make the right choices in terms of team and growth and traction and kind of company structure and all of those things. And I would think that would be true of any CVC or any VC company. Like, you evaluate your startups based on a lot of these criteria and hope that you make the right choices.
No, absolutely. Now, when it does come to investing, you are putting money in, so
Yeah.
you're a financial investor and you're a strategic investor because it's JetBlue.
Yeah.
What takes precedence? Is it applicability of a sustainable technology at JetBlue? Or is it, if I give them money, they're going to go live with 10 other airlines or within aviation?
Well, so first of all, one of our tenants at JetBlue Tech Ventures has always been that we will never tell you that you can't work with other airlines. In fact, we want you to work with other airlines. That makes you successful, right? If you're a startup in travel, the more customers and clients you have, the better, right? So we'll never limit your growth potential. Obviously, we want to choose things that we think are strategic for JetBlue. But we also, again, we have this mandate to like just in general help the industry. And so this particular theme is actually, very relevant because, some of the things that we're investing in aren't things that JetBlue might use right away. In fact, we're going to have to figure out whether they're applicable for JetBlue. Hydrogen is a very good example. We have, Airbus aircraft. How long term will Airbus aircraft be able to ingest hydrogen as fuel? Is that going to work? And we're not sure. But part of what we do is we take investments in these companies so that we have a seat at the table and so that we know this part of the business and so that we can help JetBlue make choices about long-term technology that can help them decarbonize kind of, our business. But in general, this particular theme is very much about the industry. We're in it together. We all have to like figure this out together. And so, we definitely are very focused on helping the industry decarbonize. And so, we will invest in things like hydrogen or electric aircraft or things like that JetBlue won't immediately use, but will be long-term a solution for the industry.
This is very interesting because a point I made recently was airlines tend to use sustainability as a competitive advantage, but that doesn't
Yeah.
serve anyone because it's like Airbus and Boeing saying, my plane is safer than yours. They never fight on safety.
Yep.
Similarly, airlines shouldn't be talking about sustainability as a competitive advantage. And it seems that that's a bitter pill you've already swallowed here at JTV that, hey, you know what? If a competitor of JetBlue's buys one of the technologies we invested in, that's totally fine. Was that a hard one, or was that easy from the get go?
I mean, there's definitely always a little bit of competition. And of course, our sustainability team is very focused on making sure that, they're ahead of the game and making good choices and, that people know the things that we're doing, the levers we're pulling to be sustainable. But, Robin Hayes, who's the CEO of JetBlue, as you know, is also the chair of IATA right now. And IATA, very strong sustainability goals. So clearly we're all in this together. And his perspective is, very much, this is a problem we have to solve as an industry. And fighting about it or fighting over the resources is maybe not like, the best way to go about it. How can we work together to solve these problems? So we're actually in two different, JetBlue Ventures is in two separate working groups, big, industry working groups around sustainability tech. One is an aviation climate task force that was set up by BCG and has a number of airlines associated. JetBlue and JetBlue Ventures are both part of that group. And we talk about what is the next generation of technology that needs to be funded and needs to have the right research and needs to be encouraged along that will solve these problems in the long term. And then the other piece, of course, is that we just announced our us joining TPG's Rise Climate group, the fund, as a limited partner. But also part of that is that we join. That means we're a member of their coalition, their climate coalition, and that is a very valuable tool. And this is not just the airline industry. This is amazing companies that you can think of across the board. There's the Googles and Apples and Honeywell and Delta and JetBlue and gosh, so many. Boeing is there and FedEx and just amazing companies that are all working together to think about what's the next generation of technology that does need to be funded in order for us to all take advantage of it. So we join these groups because we do know that this is a problem we have to solve as an industry. And of course, we're always looking for the edge for ourselves. But at the same time, we recognize that we do, it takes a lot of funding to get this new technology across the board. And so it's in all of our interests to really consider and encourage these technologies to grow and to be successful and to be viable for all of us.
Now, you mentioned the TPG Rise Climate Fund. That's your latest investment. Why join a fund? Is it just to hang out with the cool kids, or is there something else to it?
No, I mean we do get to hang out with the cool kids, but it's not just because of that, obviously. So we did this for a couple different reasons. Number one, TPG has got just amazing track record of making very strong investments and putting their money into places that are just really the right areas. Their Rise Climate Fund this is, I think, the second version of their fund. It's kind of a little, this is the second fund they've raised. And they are very focused on a number of different sustainability pillars, of which decarbonizing transportation is one. We joined for two reasons. Number one, it allows us to be part of investments that are bigger than the ones that we would do. TPG will invest in later stage companies, put in more money, have a bigger stake in companies than we would have access to as an early stage investor. We are very much an early stage investor. So we're looking at companies that are very early stage and how can we help them grow? TPG is like the next level of company and how can we really kind of supercharge their growth? And so that gives us access to those companies. It gives us access to, and they'll share deal flow with us. Like there might be, co-investment opportunities that we're excited about. But the second piece of that is the fact that they're not just building a fund of LPs, they're building this coalition of thought leaders. And we want to be part of that thought leadership group. And so, we're already starting, some interesting little task force within that group on, various pillars, one of which is sustainable aviation fuel, which we know is very exciting in our industry, but we don't have enough of. What we don't currently have enough to like meet our goals. And so how can we encourage that area to kind of grow and think about the next generation of tech there. So, yes, it's an investment piece, but it's also a strategic kind of coalition thought leader piece that we really were excited about. And that's why we joined.
That's fantastic, and I'm glad to see you take lead here and gives you, an in on later stage, much larger value investments, like you said. You just mentioned something about SAF. Let's talk about sustainable aviation fuel for a minute, because it's a prime example
Yes.
of a technology that's badly needed. It's in short supply, and
Yes.
it's 5 times to 6 times more expensive than the current alternate, which is normal jet aviation fuel. How does an airline first compete for a scarce resource, second fund and justify paying 5 to 6 times more for something that actually doesn't get them to net zero? It still produces emissions, but just reduced emissions. uh,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
how do you make something
Um,
like this work?
it's interesting because, the team at JetBlue, we have an amazing head of sustainability, Sarah Bogdan, and she's spending a lot of her time right now thinking about those questions. Um, and I think, from her perspective, I'm not going to try to speak for her, but I know that she's looking at, what partnerships can she put in place. There's only so much out there, so many producers, so much availability. So she's trying to make sure that, JetBlue has an appropriate amount to grow, over time. And having really great, detailed conversations about contracts, and with these companies about how can they make sustainable aviation fuel that is cost effective, and there's a lot of legislation and regulatory processes that are important in this space, because there are incentives to use sustainable aviation fuel. And so she's thinking about how those play in, and what does it really look like from a cost perspective. And when you layer in some incentives, and you have the right contract, and you have some future demand kind of commitment, then you can start to move the needle towards a little bit more of an affordable program. It's tricky. And part of what we're looking at is how can we find new sources of sustainable aviation fuel, or companies that are just at the start of this process, and how can we encourage them to continue to grow. And so that's the piece that JetBlue Tech Ventures is really thinking about, to help Sarah as she's thinking about her sustainable aviation fuel portfolio. But I guess, for good or bad, oil prices being what they are today probably brings them a little closer together, which is unfortunate, but and obviously not what anybody wants. But we're just thinking about kind of how can we increase the amount of sustainable aviation fuel, because that will make it more cost effective, to be totally honest. I mean, once you have an acceptable amount of supply to meet the demand, then prices will come down. But we're not there yet.
No, that's fair enough. The latest IPCC report that recently came out was very clear in saying it is going to be extremely difficult for airlines to hit their net zero targets in 2050. I know JetBlue has a 2040 target. You, of course, have this periscope looking out to the future of technologies. Firstly, do you think airlines can get to net zero realistically by 2040, 2050? And second question, if you were to name 2 or 3 top technologies that will help the aviation industry get there, what would they be?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Look into my crystal ball and tell you what's going to happen. I think we have a good shot at meeting our goals. Everybody just needs to continue to really focus on this particular aspect of our business, and definitely need to kind of be consistent with pulling the triggers that can help us get there. Some of the technology that I've mentioned some of the technology we're looking at, and I think those are some of the things that are going to be important to really grow and test and fund. SAF is tricky. It requires a certain type of process to produce, and some sort of stock. So one of the technologies we really love, and I think will grow, and I think this is in the coalition groups that I've been part of, this is a technology that I think people are really excited about, is this direct air capture. So pulling carbon from the air and then transforming it into fuel. It's interesting that you can pull carbon from the air and then store it, and that's great. but why can't we just make fuel with it? And that I think is a really great and compelling technology that several companies have really gained some traction here. And I think the more of these types of companies we support, the better off we'll be. It's going to be interesting to see how hydrogen and electrification play out. Hydrogen, the tricky thing for hydrogen is how do you, plug hydrogen into an aircraft? How do you store it? How do you transport it? How do existing aircraft use it? Universal Hydrogen is a great company thinking about those logistical questions and building like conversion kits and, a storage method that makes it easier to deal with, right? And so I think that's going to be a big piece of the importance of hydrogen. Electrification. So the reality is, and we look at all these startups and we understand that, the perspective that some of them have that they have built an all electric aircraft that will work. But the reality is our battery technology is not there. It's not there for range. It's not there for weight, the size of the aircraft, the weight, the payload. It's just not there yet. So we think that the electric hybrid side of the business is actually more compelling, and allows you to fly a good portion of your mission in a fully electric mode while still having the fuel based engines as part of that, right? So we think that's going to be important. It's going to be smaller aircraft. It's going to be regionals, and that's how we're going to chip away at it as an industry, right? The smaller aircraft operators, the regional carriers for every major airline, they're going to start to be electrified, and that's going to help chip away at a big problem that we have, right? And so if JetBlue has this amount of emissions, but part of it is our regional partners, we get to chip away at that through that method. So, but then the last thing I think that people need to think about is that infrastructure needs are gonna be very real. How do we change our infrastructure, to operate better with hydrogen, with electrification? You know, Even just finding places where SAF will be delivered to aircraft. Like it's just, there's an infrastructure play here that we really have to make sure we're paying attention to.
No, that is very well articulated. I have to admit. To me, it seems like we are going to see a Prius first, which is a hybrid car, rather than Teslas flying around, which is all
Yeah.
electric.
Yeah, I think that's true because if you have a fully electric aircraft, it's a small aircraft. I mean, the eVTOL space is really where fully electric will explode and be that viable because it's a small craft with a shorter mission, and you can fly that electric. A fixed wing aircraft, it's going to be hard. You've got, power needs for takeoff and landing. You've got, only so much range. You've got the requirements from the FAA on reserves. Those are very real things that we have to overcome.
Absolutely. Now, sort of summing up, yes, sustainable technologies are a critical part of the future, but then,
Hmm.
some may work, some may not work due to infrastructure issues, due to government
Hmm.
issues. What are you most excited about the future of sustainable aviation?
Well, I mean, I've talked about a lot of the technologies I like. I think my favorite right now is the direct air capture. I think that's, super compelling. But what I'm most excited about is the fact that we're all talking about this so much, right? And, there's so many great companies out there. There's a lot of investment in startups, and that's important because it's expensive technology. You need investments, strong investment into this technology in order to make it work. If it's going to be successful, it's because we're investing in it. So I'm excited about the amount of investment that's out there. There's so much. In fact, as an airline CBC, we're competing with like the world to invest in some of these startups. And sometimes it's hard to get into those rounds because there's some very, very compelling funds out there that are just focused on climate tech, and that's great. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the fact that we have these coalitions of thought leaders that are trying to solve these problems and really dig into what are the ones that are most important, these technologies that are most important. I think those are very exciting. And then there's a lot of adjacent tech that's starting to think about how they contribute to the sustainability problem. We have a couple investments in AI companies, that are using data to solve these problems. How much fuel you burn, how you track and load fuel onto your aircraft. saving around the edges. You need that. You need that just as much as you need a direct air direct air company that's making fuel. So you need all of those things to work together in order for this to be successful. And if we meet these goals that are very aggressive, it's not because of one piece of technology. It's going to be because of all of these pieces of technology all coming together.
Yeah, I think that's what gives me the most hope. That is not just a silver bullet,
Right.
a single solution for everything. It's horses for courses.
Mm-hmm.
You might have electric for a short distance.
Mm-hmm.
You might have hybrids for medium haul, and you might have hydrogen for longer haul, let's say. And all of them will work together. And similarly, a lot of these suppliers, I recently learned of a company called Satavia that reduces emissions from contrails.
Yes.
And I had no idea that there's so many secondary emissions from contrails. I learned about Carbon Click, which is doing radical transparency when it comes to carbon offsetting, and that's their key thing. And I love how the entire ecosystem, like you said, is thinking together about solving this problem, and that's what gives me the most hope. And a lot of what you shared today is incredibly exciting, and I'm so happy that an airline that is, I think, one of the smaller airlines in the US is putting so much weight behind something like this, and that gives all the big guys even more impetus to do even more.
Yeah, definitely. There's always the competition in the airline industry, so we're all kind of goading each other along. Look what we've done. What have you done? So it's good. It's healthy competition. For sure.
No, Amy, this is very exciting. I really appreciate you sharing how JTV works, what excites you about the future, and as I said, I'm full of hope after our conversation.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff, so it's always a fun conversation.
I can definitely tell. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. We hope you liked it and will share it with your network. Please also leave us a review. Awareness is the key to a green future. Your support will help our insights on sustainable aviation reach a wider audience. In addition, for every single listen of this podcast, we will plant a tree. And for every single review, we will plant 50 trees. You can also write to us at podcast@simpliflying.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website, simpliflying.com, and join the movement.